It wasn't the emergency call that changed everything that day. It was the dog standing in the middle of the road, like it had been waiting for them. What happened next would save a man's life. It was a cold Thursday morning in Seattle. The clouds hung heavy, and the rain hadn't stopped since midnight. Puddles gathered along the curbs, and the roads glistened under the constant downpour. Inside Ambulance Unit 42, paramedics Jack and Emily were racing through the wet streets. The call came in only 5 minutes earlier. An elderly man was possibly missing or in medical distress near the edge of the woods outside the city. Every second mattered. The siren wailed, cutting through the sound of rain hitting the windshield. Jack kept his hands steady on the wheel, weaving through traffic while Emily double-checked their medical equipment. Suddenly, Jack slammed on the brakes. A large brown dog stood directly in their path. The dog didn't flinch. It was soaked, its fur clinging tightly to its thin frame. Its dark eyes stared directly at the ambulance, like it had been waiting for them. Calm, patient, almost too focused for a stray. Jack honked once. Nothing. He honked again. The dog still refused to move. "This is weird," Jack muttered. Emily leaned forward from the back seat. "What's going on?" "There's a dog blocking the road. Won't move." Emily grabbed her raincoat and stepped outside, feeling the cold rain instantly soak through her clothes. The dog stayed still, as if unbothered by her approach. Its gaze locked onto her face. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, crouching down, trying not to frighten the animal. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The dog didn't growl, didn't bark. It took 2 slow steps backward, then sat down again, eyes unblinking. Jack called out, "Emily, we're on an emergency run, remember?" "I know," she answered, "but I don't think this dog is lost. I think he's trying to tell us something." The dog stood up and turned toward the woods, pausing to glance back at Emily. Then it walked into the trees. Emily hesitated only a second, then followed. Jack sighed deeply. He knew his partner's instincts were rarely wrong. He grabbed a flashlight, locked the ambulance, and went after her. The ground was slick with mud, fallen leaves, and wet branches. The deeper they walked, the darker and quieter it became. Only the rain and their footsteps broke the silence. The dog trotted ahead, always staying just far enough to guide them, but close enough to see. After a few minutes, the dog stopped under a large cedar tree in a small clearing. And there, lying still on the wet ground, was a man. He appeared to be in his late 70s. His grey hair was soaked, and his skin was pale. His breathing was shallow and uneven. Emily dropped to her knees beside him and quickly checked his pulse. "He's alive, but just barely. We have to move fast." Jack radioed their location to dispatch, requesting backup and additional support. The dog paced nervously in a small circle, letting out small, worried whimpers as they carefully placed the man onto a stretcher and secured him. They struggled back up the slope, fighting against the mud, the rain, and the thick brush. But the dog stayed with them every step of the way. When they finally reached the ambulance, Emily hesitated as she glanced back at the animal. The dog tried to climb into the back of the vehicle, following the man instinctively. "We can't bring him inside," Jack said, shaking his head. But Emily felt something she couldn't explain. "He led us here, Jack. He's connected to this man." Jack sighed. "All right, but you're responsible for him." The dog curled up at the man's feet the moment it was allowed inside, as if trying to protect him. The ambulance raced toward the hospital, sirens wailing, while Emily monitored the man's vitals and adjusted the oxygen mask. The dog lay completely still, except for its eyes, which watched the man's face without blinking. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses rushed to receive the patient. Tests were run immediately. The diagnosis was clear. The man had suffered a severe stroke. If they had arrived even 30 minutes later, his chances would have been slim. Outside the hospital entrance, the dog sat patiently, refusing to leave. Hours passed. Rain came and went. Still, the dog waited. Emily visited the animal during her breaks, bringing it food and water. But the dog only ate when she stayed beside him. His loyalty was unwavering. His eyes always fixed on the doors of the hospital. The following morning, the hospital staff gathered for their shift change. Some nurses had already noticed the dog still sitting outside the entrance. Rain had turned into a light mist, but the dog remained in its spot, unmoving, eyes fixed on the doors. Emily arrived early for her shift. The first thing she did was check on the dog. "You're still here, huh?" she whispered, gently stroking its damp fur. The dog's eyes briefly met hers, but soon returned to watch the hospital doors again. Inside, the man they had rescued was in the intensive care unit. His name, they learned, was Mr. Walter Brooks. He lived alone in a small house near the woods. No one had known he was missing, except for the dog. Doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize him. The stroke had left him weak, unable to speak, and barely able to move. His condition was fragile, but thanks to the fast response, there was hope. Every few hours, Emily would visit the dog and bring it small portions of food. But even then, it only ate when she stayed by its side. Several hospital staff members began calling the dog Buddy. By the third day, Emily approached the hospital director with a request. "Sir," she began carefully, "I know it's against the rules, but the dog, Buddy, he hasn't left since we brought Mr. Brooks in. I believe the two are deeply connected." The director sighed, rubbing his temples. "Emily, I understand, but we can't allow animals inside ICU." "I know," she replied, "but I think seeing Buddy might help Mr. Brooks. He hasn't responded to anything so far. Maybe this could reach him." After a long pause, the director finally nodded. One visit, short, controlled. Emily smiled gratefully. "Thank you, sir. I promise we'll be careful." That afternoon, Emily gently led Buddy through the hospital's side entrance. Nurses and doctors paused in the hallways, watching with soft smiles as the dog walked calmly beside her, as if he understood the importance of where they were going. Inside the room, Mr. Brooks lay quietly, his eyes closed, machines softly beeping around him. Emily whispered to Buddy, "Go on." The dog approached the bed slowly, ears low, tail wagging gently. When he reached the bedside, Buddy let out a soft whimper and placed his head near Mr. Brooks's hand. At first, nothing happened. Then, Mr. Brooks's fingers twitched. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The dog whimpered again, nudging the man's hand softly. Mr. Brooks's lips trembled. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Then, in a raspy, broken whisper, a word escaped his mouth. "Max!" Emily's eyes widened. This was the dog's real name. Buddy, or Max, responded immediately, licking the man's hand gently, his whole body wagging now, as if relief had finally arrived. Doctors and nurses nearby watched in awe. Emily wiped her eyes, unable to hold back her tears. The visit was kept brief, but something had clearly changed. In the following days, Mr. Brooks began responding more. He started moving his hands, then speaking short words, and finally holding simple conversations. The doctors were amazed. His recovery, once uncertain, was now progressing much faster than expected. They all agreed. It was the emotional connection that made the difference. A few days later, a woman arrived at the hospital. She introduced herself as Linda, Walter Brooks' daughter. "I've been trying to reach him for days," she said, her voice shaking. "He must have gone for his usual morning walk in the woods when it happened. I had no idea where to look." Emily explained everything. How Max had found them, how the dog led them straight to her father. Tears filled Linda's eyes as she knelt to pet Max. "You never left him, did you?" she whispered. In the following weeks, Walter's condition continued to improve. Emily visited them regularly, and Max was eventually allowed into the hospital more often under careful supervision. Each time the dog entered the room, Walter's eyes would light up. Finally, the day came when Walter was well enough to be discharged. Nurses and doctors gathered to wish him well. As Walter was wheeled outside, Max was already waiting by the entrance. The dog stood up, tail wagging, eyes sparkling with joy. Walter smiled, reaching out his hand. "Come here, boy." Max bounded forward, pressing his head into Walter's lap. The reunion was simple, but full of deep emotion. Emily stood nearby, smiling softly. She had seen many things in her career, but few moments as pure as this. As Linda helped her father into the car, Max jumped in too, settling happily beside him. The car door closed, and they drove off together, finally going home. But that night, as the hospital quieted down, Emily stepped outside to head home. And there, under the dim streetlight, she saw a familiar figure. Max had returned. He sat quietly near the entrance again, as if unsure if his job was really done. Emily walked over, knelt beside him, and gently rubbed his head. "He's home now, Max. You did it." The dog looked up at her, tail wagging softly. After a few minutes, a car pulled up. Linda had returned to fetch Max. As they drove away together for the final time, Emily whispered to herself, "Some bonds can't be explained. Some loyalty goes beyond words. And sometimes love comes in the shape of a soaked dog that stops traffic to save a life."